The alpha's desire. Have you ever caught a glimpse of your own face in a dusty storefront window late at night? And asked yourself if you're about to stumble onto some godforsaken secret that just might kill you, yet still refuse to turn back? Because that's exactly how I felt the night I arrived in Ravenwood. I should have spun my car around, driven back to civilization, and pretended I never heard the rumors about missing hikers, half-eaten livestock, and the local law looking the other way. But no. Something about that place called to me like a dare, whispering, "You won't survive here, Aurora." And I've never been great at backing down. I'd been on the road for 7 hours, weaving through miles of dense pine and ash trees under a moon that felt too large. By the time I saw the wooden sign that said "Welcome to Ravenwood" in chipped black paint, I was so jumpy I nearly swerved into a ditch at the rustle of something in the brush. The sign also read Population 2191, with a jagged line cutting through the last digit as if the town itself couldn't decide how many souls it contained. Or lost. I parked outside Harper's Diner, the only bright spot along a stretch of road that otherwise seemed dead. The neon sign sputtered pink and green, half of it burned out. Inside smelled of old grease, thick coffee left too long on the burner, and the ghosts of 1,000 regrets. A teenage waitress with dyed pink hair and hollow eyes eyed me with polite disinterest. She poured my coffee like she did it 100 times a day without a single flicker of hope. 2 old men in the corner spoke in whispers that quieted the second I opened the door. Their eyes followed me, half wary, half curious, like I carried trouble in my back pocket. I wasn't here to make friends. I just needed a place to sit, maybe figure out which rumor to chase first. The missing people. The bizarre injuries on livestock. The rumor of oversized wolves in the mountains. I was chasing a story, plain and simple. Because that's what I do, find mysteries nobody else cares to solve, then poke them until they hiss back. The coffee was bitter as tar. I sipped it, forcing my expression not to flinch. The lights buzzed overhead, a constant dull hum that made my temples ache. I overheard the old men in the corner muttering about the last body found, though they cut off fast when my gaze flicked to them. I could catch only scraps, midnight, torn flesh, too big to be normal. That was enough to make my skin crawl. Then the door opened and in walked the kind of man you don't ignore. He moved like he owned the floor, like you'd better step aside or he'd walk straight through you. Tall, broad shoulders in a worn leather jacket, hair just a touch too long, half curled at the nape. I couldn't see the color of his eyes yet, but I felt them the moment he looked my way. And something in my gut whispered, he's not safe. Yet I couldn't glance away. He took a stool at the far end, the waitress automatically pouring him a mug of coffee without a word. He studied me for all of 2 seconds, and in that stare, a chill worked up my spine. A warning. Then he downed half the coffee, tossed some bills on the counter, and left. Like he'd only come in to see if I was real. When the door slammed shut behind him, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The waitress sighed, too. I asked her who that was. She looked reluctant to answer. Finally, she said his name was Malachi Stone, and she gave me a look that said don't ask more. I didn't push her, though. Because something in me already knew, if I wanted to dig up Ravenwood's darkest secrets, I'd just found my first lead. My rented cabin lay a half-mile out of town, near the forest that the locals avoided. The inside was musty, almost damp. One sagging couch, a dusty fireplace, a small bed in the corner, plus a rickety kitchen that wouldn't pass any modern inspection. There was a big window facing the pines. At night, it felt like an invitation for anything out there to watch me. The wind whistled in the eaves, a lonely sound that made me rub at the goosebumps on my arms. I fired up my laptop, scanning the local reports. Most newspapers said animal attack, refusing to name the type of animal. A few personal blog posts hinted at something more: screams at midnight, footprints bigger than any wolf should have, bodies that vanished without a trace. A hush by local law enforcement. My next move was to check in with the sheriff. But that could wait till morning. The black coffee was wearing off. I needed sleep. A sound sliced through the cabin's silence, a low howl. I'd heard wolves before on past assignments, but something about this one sounded wrong. Deeper. Icy dread prickled across my skin. I peered out the big window, but the moonlit yard showed only a few twisted pines. Then, in the corner of my vision, movement. A shape, massive, upright 1 second, gone the next. My heart thudded. I yanked the curtains shut and locked the door. No more investigating tonight. The following morning, I found the sheriff's office near the center of town. It looked about as old as the local diner, with scuffed floors and the stale odor of industrial cleaner. Sheriff Duran was built like a retired boxer gone to seed, thick around the middle, face set in an expression that said, "Don't test me." He didn't stand when I introduced myself, just eyed me with the exasperation men in small towns reserve for nosy city reporters. I asked about the attacks. He said local wildlife was to blame. He gave me the same line every policeman does when they want you gone. "Nothing more to see here, Mississippi." I pressed for specifics: wolves, rumors of something bigger. He stiffened. Told me, in a voice tight and final, to drop it for my own good. I recognized a man who'd decided not to talk. Probably some hush order from the council, or maybe his own fear. So I left without a fight, but not without determination. The sheriff wasn't the only person in town who knew the truth. Harper's Diner by day was the same as by night, tired, hollow, serving coffee that could burn holes in your gut. I sat by the window again, flipping through the notes I'd taken on my phone. People drifted in, men in flannel jackets grabbing breakfast, an old woman rummaging her coin purse for exact change. Then Malachi Stone appeared. My stomach knotted. There was something about him that made me tense, a primal warning that said he was the biggest predator in the room. He settled across from me without asking, his presence filling the booth as if every inch belonged to him. "You should leave Ravenwood," he said in a soft, menacing tone, not caring if anyone overheard. I folded my arms, returning his steady gaze. "I just got here." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "That's the problem." He stared with eyes the color of a storm about to break, and I realized they were a pale gray blue. They felt ancient. "You don't belong here," he added. I tried to remain calm. "I'm investigating the disappearances. The so-called wolf attacks." His lips curved in something that wasn't a smile. "You're chasing a funeral if you keep it up." A prickle of unease rippled through me. "Is that a warning or a threat?" He leaned forward, voice dropping. "It's a kindness. You're messing with something bigger than you, Aurora. People in this town have secrets that'll chew you up and spit you out. Go home." Before I could answer, he stood, tossed money on the table for my coffee, and walked out. I wanted to call after him, demand he explain, but the words stuck in my throat. He was gone. The diner felt colder. My coffee tasted even more bitter. I heard hush remarks from two men a few booths over, half whispered. Another one last night. Shouldn't stay out after dark. The woods aren't safe. I pretended I didn't hear them, but I typed every word into my phone. Another missing person, possibly? I spent the afternoon hunting leads at the library, scanning old microfilm, searching for patterns in local tragedies. The pattern was disturbingly repetitive, unexplained wolf attacks going back decades, bodies torn apart, or folks simply never found. The survivors who reported sightings mentioned wolves bigger than bears, some upright like men. Others claimed they'd been saved by a lone black wolf. A vigilante beast, if that wasn't the strangest concept imaginable. The puzzle pieces rattled around my mind. I drove my battered sedan along the main highway, scanning for anything odd. That's when I spotted a battered green pickup in my rear view, Malachi Stone's. My pulse fluttered. Was he following me, or just passing by? In any case, he turned up a side road before I could wave him down or confront him. Part of me yearned to follow, but caution held me back. Dusk found me at my cabin, rummaging for a flashlight. The forest beyond the clearing called to me in a twisted, siren-like way. My gut said I needed evidence of something more than regular wolves. I needed prints, photos, claw marks, anything to prove how real, and how wrong, this threat was. I trekked into the woods, flashlight cutting through the gloom. The air felt too thick. Needles and dead leaves muffled my steps. Half a mile in, I found massive paw prints easily twice the size of a normal wolf. My heart lurched. I snapped pictures. Then I saw claw marks on a trunk, deep grooves. Fear should have made me turn back. Instead, I ventured deeper, searching for more clues. That's when I heard it, a low, menacing growl from behind me. Spinning around, I caught sight of a hulking silhouette among the pines. My flashlight beam flickered across fur, dark gray, bristling with muscle. Eyes that glowed faintly gold in the night. It was bigger than any animal I'd seen, towering on all fours at the height of my chest. Its lips curled back, fangs bared. My knees went weak. This was no normal wolf. It stared at me like it recognized me, like it had been waiting. Panic roared in my veins. I tried to steady my breathing, tried to back away slowly. The beast tensed, ready to spring. Then an explosion of movement. Another wolf, a black one, bigger and faster, crashed into the gray monster, a collision that shook the ground. The gray wolf snarled, twisting to fight back. Their teeth tore at each other in a flurry of savage strength. I stumbled behind a fallen log, heart pounding, as the black wolf pinned the gray. The gray let out a yelp that turned my blood cold, then retreated, vanishing into the darkness. The black wolf turned, luminous eyes locking on me. My flashlight illuminated thick, obsidian fur, a massive frame. I should have been petrified. Instead, I felt an odd pull. Then, impossibly, the fur rippled, shrank, and the wolf changed. Bones popped, limbs bent. The shape reformed into a man. Malachi Stone. Naked, panting, covered in dirt and a few cuts. But definitely him. He stared, chest heaving, while my mind spun in chaotic circles. Malachi was a wolf. A shapeshifter. A man who wasn't human at all. I must have fainted because I woke in a small, lamplit room that smelled of lavender and old paper. My head throbbed. I discovered myself on a cot, my shoes off. A woman with silver threads in her dark hair stirred something in a wooden bowl. She introduced herself as Celia Lockwood, said she was Ravenwood's local apothecary among other things. When she saw I was awake, she gave me a look that said, "So you found out?" I demanded answers, still half dizzy. She calmly explained that Malachi kept the real monsters out of Ravenwood, and that not everything that roamed these woods was a mere wolf. I pushed for details, but she only offered cryptic warnings. The gray beast was a rogue, once part of something bigger, now a murderous threat. Malachi had saved me. She wouldn't say more. Then Malachi burst in. Shirtless, exhausted, chest smeared with dried blood. His eyes found mine, relief flashing across his face before frustration took over. He asked what I was doing in the woods. I told him I needed evidence. He cursed, said I could have died, that he wasn't sure he'd get there in time. His anger was raw, fueled by worry. I shoved back, refusing to be coddled. That tension sparked again, an undercurrent that made my pulse spike. Celia cleared her throat, politely ignoring the charged atmosphere. Malachi insisted I drop the story, leave Ravenwood. I refused. He paced, hands in his hair, looking torn between yelling at me or locking me away to keep me safe. I told him to let me decide my fate. He parted his lips as if to argue, then spun on his heel and stalked out into the night. The door slammed behind him, leaving my head spinning again, for entirely different reasons. The next day, I visited the sheriff's office again, determined to find a crack in his armor. I pressed him about the new half-eaten cattle found near the river. He gave me the same stone-walled refusal. Eventually, he kicked me out, eyes flicking with fear. It was clear he wasn't in control of Ravenwood's real problem. That night, I tossed and turned in my cabin, dreaming of giant wolves and unstoppable men, of Malachi's eyes. When I woke, I realized the truth. I wasn't simply an outsider stumbling on a story. I was somehow part of it now. Because I felt changed, as if Malachi's presence had awakened something in me. That made me furious and intrigued in equal measure. But my anger gave me an edge. So I marched back to Celia's shop, demanding the rest of the story. She told me about a rogue named Darius, once part of Malachi's pack. She explained Darius had turned feral, started killing indiscriminately, aiming especially at women. Malachi exiled him, but Darius believed Malachi had betrayed him. He'd sworn revenge, picking off the townspeople to lure Malachi out. My stomach twisted at the sick logic. This was bigger than a random spree of wildlife attacks. It was personal. A vendetta. I left Celia's place reeling. If Darius was the gray beast that attacked me, that meant he wouldn't stop until he destroyed everything Malachi cared about. Possibly including me. That night, I barricaded my cabin door. Sometime after midnight, I heard footsteps outside. A knock, heavy, insistent. My chest seized with panic. But I forced myself to open it, brandishing a kitchen knife. Turned out, it was only Malachi. He looked furious I was about to stab him, but then he saw how shaken I was. He told me Darius might mark me as a target, that I had to be careful. I let him in, though I tried to hide how much his presence made me tremble in a way that wasn't purely fear. He smelled like pine needles and crisp winter air. Something about him drew me in, even though I knew he was dangerous. He explained that a full moon was coming, that Darius's power would be at its peak. I asked how he knew this. His jaw tightened. Because I share his curse, he said. But I control it. He doesn't. He left soon after, quietly promising to watch over the cabin from the woods. I barely slept, half hoping I'd see his black wolf pacing outside. Days passed, the tension in Ravenwood mounting. Another body turned up, a middle-aged local man with his throat torn out. People whispered that the sheriff was useless, that an invisible war was raging in the forest. Malachi was nowhere to be seen during daylight. At night, I sensed him near the tree line, a silent sentinel. I wondered if his pack was out there too. One evening, I reached my cabin to find smears of red across the door, pig's blood. Painted in savage letters, "You are mine." My stomach lurched. This had Darius's name all over it. The second I whipped out my phone to call the sheriff, the trees rustled. I turned and glimpsed a figure prowling the edge of the clearing, eyes faintly luminous, breath steaming in the cold. Darius. He stared at me with a twisted grin, then vanished. Before I could freak out, Malachi stormed out of the shadows, eyes wild. He'd caught the scent. He demanded to know if I was hurt, checking me for injuries. His hands lingered on my arms, my waist. I could see the raw panic in him. I told him I was fine, heart hammering from his closeness. He told me to pack up, that he'd take me somewhere safe. My stubborn pride erupted. "Don't order me around," I snapped. He barked back that I was in over my head. We glared at each other, the air crackling with that same primal tension. Something about him made me want to stand my ground, even while part of me wanted him to drag me away. In the end, I told him if he insisted on protecting me, do it here. He looked ready to tear out his own hair, but eventually, he nodded. I wish I could say that resolved things, but it only raised the stakes. Because that night, I dreamed of running through the forest with Malachi at my side, both of us wolves, hearts pounding in perfect sync. I woke sweating, the bond's echo still thrumming in my veins. I hated that. Hated how it felt so inevitable. At noon the following day, we found a fresh corpse near the diner, some poor local with his chest shredded. The sign Darius carved near the body was archaic, a swirling crest that reeked of ancient vendettas. That was the final straw. Malachi hustled me into his truck, telling me, no more debate. We're going to my pack's territory. They'll keep you safe. I refused to budge until he explained exactly who or what this pack was. He swore there wasn't time. I cursed him out. He rolled his eyes and said I was the most infuriating woman he'd ever met. My heart soared at that. We compromised by me letting him drive me somewhere remote, a sanctuary, he called it, so he could gather reinforcements. He drove down a dirt road that twisted deep into the pines. Neither of us spoke, but the tension was thick as midnight. Eventually, we arrived at a hidden clearing. A large door set into a hillside. Inside, I found a fire-lit chamber where several others waited, both men and women, all exuding that same too strong, too wild energy Malachi had. They glowered at me with curiosity or suspicion. One older woman with silver hair, Celia, the apothecary, was among them, stirring a pot of herbs. I realized these were shapeshifters. Malachi's pack. He told them Darius was escalating, and that I'd been targeted. They listened in grave silence. I tried to hide my shock. Malachi turned to me, eyes flicking with an emotion I couldn't name. He said quietly, You'll be safe with us. You have to trust me. My chest tightened. Because trust was precisely what I never gave easily, especially not to a man whose secrets could tear me apart. And yet, he took me aside, voice hushed. You feel it, he said. Don't deny it. The bond. We're connected. It's real. Fight it if you want, but Darius will use that fight to destroy you. Let me keep you alive. My throat closed up. I didn't want to talk about an unearthly bond. But some part of me recognized the truth. That I was bound to Malachi in a way I couldn't explain. I turned on my heel and left the chamber, ignoring the uneasy stares. Back in my cabin that night, I was determined to finalize my notes, plan a piece exposing Ravenwood's nightmares. But that was when the door burst open. Darius. He moved impossibly fast, grabbing me, choking off my scream. He dragged me into the woods, far from any hope of rescue. Slamming me onto the ground, he pinned me. His eyes were a sickly gold as he spoke in a voice halfway between beast and man. Malachi wants you. That's why I'll tear you apart, so he knows how it feels to lose everything. Terror strangled me, but I fought. He was too strong. Right as I felt my consciousness slipping, Malachi crashed into the clearing, shifting from man to wolf in seconds. They fought savagely, blood splattering the pine needles. At one point, Malachi roared in pain, Darius's claws raking deep. I scrambled to a fallen blade, seized it, and when I had an opening, I stabbed Darius through the heart. He died laughing, saying something about how this wasn't the end. Malachi collapsed, bleeding from mortal wounds. I crawled to him, sobbing, pressing my hands to his chest. Don't you dare leave me, I whispered, an ache in my voice I'd never heard before. He coughed, eyes glazed. Something in me snapped. I kissed him, a desperate plea. The world exploded with heat, a surge of primal magic that welded our destinies. My vision hazed with bright sparks. When I pulled back, Malachi's wounds were gone. My entire body felt rewired. The pack arrived moments later, finishing off any stray rogues. All I could do was cling to Malachi's hand, heart pounding in time with his. Exhaustion hit us all, but the relief was palpable. We retreated to the hidden sanctuary. People whispered that Darius had been put down for good. Malachi didn't let me out of his sight. We said little, but every time his gaze met mine, that bond pulled, a living force bridging the space between us. Later, as I tried to sleep by the fireplace, he knelt next to me and said quietly, I felt our bond the moment I saw you. I couldn't explain it, but, you're mine, Aurora. I trembled, tears stinging. I don't belong to anyone. Not by force, he murmured, brushing a thumb across my cheek. But by choice, I hope. I let him hold me, and for the first time, I didn't fight the closeness. Something told me this was only the start of a new, far more dangerous journey. I woke at dawn with my head on his shoulder, tension coiling in my gut. Because if Darius had allies, if there were other threats lurking, Ravenwood wouldn't be safe. Malachi stirred, pressing a warm kiss to my hair. It felt so natural, I almost forgot to breathe. Then we parted, and he said, "Come with me." I followed him outside. The pack was regrouping, disposing of Darius's remains, ensuring no sign remained of the battle. Malachi told them all, we watched the boundaries. Others might come. The threat isn't gone. They nodded solemnly. Then he turned to me. You can still leave if you want, he said, voice thick with longing. I can't force you to stay in a place that might bring more terror than you signed on for. I recalled my old life. Dead-end jobs, chasing stories that never satisfied. Here, in Ravenwood, I nearly died, but I also felt more alive than anywhere else. Because something about Malachi, about these woods, called me. I'm staying, I said. He let out a breath, half relief, half sorrow. Then we stand together. I returned to my cabin, half expecting it to feel like a tomb, but it was just an empty house in the morning light. The sheriff visited midday, stiffly thanking me for my help in stopping the rogue threat. He refused to ask how, but I saw the gratitude in his eyes. Maybe now, Ravenwood might find peace. Or maybe not. Because as nightfall crept closer, I sensed a new dread. Like the forest wasn't done with us. I found Malachi waiting in my yard, leaning against an old pine. He said he wanted to show me a place where the pack gathered under the full moon. We drove an hour out, deeper than before, to a place where the ridge overlooked an endless sea of trees. The sun was dipping, painting the sky in violent oranges and purples. He parked the truck, got out, and helped me down. Usually, I'd roll my eyes at such chivalry, but tonight I let him. We walked side by side, shoulders brushing. An old clearing opened up, ringed by ancient stone pillars grown over with moss. The air shimmered with old magic. He turned to me, eyes intense. You changed me, he said softly. The night you saved me from Darius. I felt your power fuse with mine. It's like we're tethered. I stepped closer, pressing a hand to his chest where the scars had vanished. I'm nobody special, I murmured. He laughed quietly, shaking his head. That's where you're wrong. His arms slid around my waist. The bond was a living presence between us, humming with desire, with a sense of finality that made my throat tight. You can run from it, he said, but it'll follow you. Or you can choose it. Something in me crumbled. I'm tired of running. Then I rose on my toes, capturing his mouth with mine. This kiss wasn't frantic or desperate like before. It was acceptance, an oath sealed under the twilight. His grip on my hips tightened, my fingers threading through his dark hair. Every nerve in my body lit up. The wind rustled through the pillars, and I swear I felt the forest sigh in approval. When we broke apart, breathing unsteady, the moon had risen behind the pines, silver and watchful. Stay with me, he whispered. I nodded, resting my forehead against his. My chest fluttered with a sense of belonging I'd never known. Maybe the future held new terrors. Maybe the pack's enemies would come. But for now, in this moment, I let the bond envelop us both. This was more than a story to chase. It was my life, bound to Malachi Stones in ways I couldn't fully understand yet, but which I refused to deny any longer. Everything smelled like night, damp earth, pine resin, and the faint musk that always clung to Malachi. The forest around us was at once sinister and comforting, and I could feel each breath he took as if it were my own. Somehow, after all the terror and insanity, being in his arms felt like the only thing that made sense. His warmth radiated into me, and though he said nothing, the weight of his gaze explained everything he couldn't put into words. We stayed like that for what might have been minutes or hours. Time ceased to matter. The moon climbed higher, bathing us in pearly light that painted his hair, his cheekbones, the strong line of his jaw. For a fleeting moment, I let go of fear. Let go of the blood, the kills, the haunted expression in the eyes of townsfolk who'd lost too many neighbors to unspeakable creatures. Here, in this silent glade of ancient stones, it was just me and him. And the bond. Eventually, he cleared his throat. "We should head back," he said, voice low with reluctant practicality. "My pack is still on alert. Darius may be gone, but there are others out there who might want to finish what he started." I nodded, releasing him with painful slowness. I didn't want to let him go, but we couldn't hide forever. I managed a wobbly smile. "Lead the way. I'm right behind you." We hiked back to his truck, the hush between us anything but awkward. If anything, it throbbed with the new awareness that something vital had changed. He offered me a hand up into the passenger seat. When he eased behind the wheel, he exhaled a tense breath, as if forcibly reining in some swirl of emotion. I pretended not to notice, turning my head to the window. But inside, my heart hammered with a wild, bright pulse. He drove with both hands gripping the steering wheel in a white-knuckled hold. The old dirt road jostled us, but neither of us spoke. At the outskirts of town, he glanced at me. "Where do you want me to drop you?" he asked quietly. I studied him, noticing the faint stubble shading his cheek, the tendon flexing in his neck. Something inside me whispered that returning to my cabin alone was a bad idea. The memory of Darius's final words, "This isn't over," still chilled my blood. "I should check on my cabin," I said slowly, but maybe, I wasn't sure how to phrase the request. "Stay with me? Protect me? Sleep in my bed?" He seemed to understand. "We'll both go. Make sure everything's secure," he said, voice gentler now. "You don't have to do this alone." We pulled up to the small structure in silence. My porch still bore faint stains from that bloody message, though the sheriff's men had cleaned most of it away. Malachi's brow creased as he scanned the tree line. Then he turned off the engine, hopped out, and circled around to open my door before I could do it myself. Normally, I'd snap at that kind of old-fashioned courtesy, but some rebellious part of me warmed to it. Inside, the cabin was dim and smelled faintly of anxiety. I realized that was my own leftover panic clinging to these walls. Malachi wandered, checking windows, sniffing the air. My breath caught at the reminder that he was more wolf than man, that all of this, our connection, his existence, should be impossible. Yet it was real. I busied myself flicking on lamps. He paused by the couch, a hand trailing across the back. "Nothing fresh," he murmured. "No sign of intruders. At least not tonight." I nodded, relief tangling with lingering nerves. "Do you think you can stay?" "Just for tonight," I added quickly, "in case any of Darius's allies come. Or whoever took his place." He raked a hand through his dark hair, eyes flicking over me. "Yeah," he said. "I can stay." We didn't turn on the TV or radio. We ended up sitting side by side on the worn couch, the only light coming from a small lamp in the corner that cast a mellow, golden glow over the threadbare rug. Neither of us was sure how to talk about what happened earlier, our kiss, the bond that flared like a cosmic vow. Instead, we ended up discussing the pack's next steps, the possibility of other rogues. He talked about wanting to unite the rest of his kind, to strengthen Ravenwood's defenses. I told him how the sheriff might resent an outsider's help but would eventually yield if the situation demanded it. We were tiptoeing around the bigger conversation. Malachi said he'd take the floor, but I refused, pointing out there was only one bed and it was small, and I wasn't going to let him be uncomfortable. We ended up settling with me in bed, him in the single armchair by the window, half dozing, half on guard. Sleep tiptoed around me, never fully landing, but exhaustion finally dragged me under. Twice, I bolted awake from nightmares about Darius's claws. Each time, Malachi was there, murmuring low reassurances that lulled me back into fitful rest. When dawn broke, I found him out on the porch, inhaling the crisp air. He offered a half smile when he saw me. "Morning," he said. "Sleep okay?" I rubbed my gritty eyes. "Better than I would have on my own." "Thanks." He gave a brief nod, then gently touched my elbow. "You should come meet the rest of my pack officially. Celia, Jonas, the others. They want to see you. They think you're special." My heart stuttered. Special? Because of this weird bond thing, or because I'm the only human dumb enough to stay? He almost smiled. Bit of both. I huffed, crossing my arms. "Fine. Let me get dressed." We drove up a winding road deeper into the mountains, where the town gave way to ancient pines. Malachi's truck rumbled along a rugged path until we arrived at a sprawling lodge, half hidden by a protective ring of trees. I glimpsed the faint glint of silver wards hammered into the wood around the entrance, old runic shapes reminiscent of Celia's apothecary's shop. Inside, the lodge was warm and surprisingly homey, with a big stone fireplace, worn leather couches, and a battered wooden table that looked like it had hosted a century's worth of arguments. Several people lingered, half watching the windows, half reading battered paperbacks or sorting supplies. Their gazes snapped to me with open curiosity. I recognized a few, Celia stirring something that smelled pungent, Jonas fiddling with a stack of weapons that might have been silver-laced. Another woman, tall, arms sleeved in tattoos, gave me a friendly nod. Malachi introduced me briefly, calling me by name Aurora, with a ring of pride in his voice that made me go hot under the collar. Some of them bowed their heads slightly in respect, as though acknowledging I was more than an intruder now. I wondered if they sensed my connection to Malachi. My cheeks burned. We spent the day discussing strategies. I watched how Malachi commanded quiet authority, how they hung on his words. He wasn't alpha by some official title, but he was their unspoken leader. Jonas recommended doubling perimeter checks. The tall tattooed woman, Nessa, suggested we warn the sheriff outright about more potential rogues. Malachi listened, arms folded, occasionally glancing my way for input. Around midday, Celia motioned me aside, into a small corner room lined with old books. "You've sealed your bond with him, haven't you?" she asked, eyes flicking over me like she could see my soul. I stiffened. Bond's a strong word. I don't know what it means yet. She gave me a pitying look. "It means you're part of this pack's future, Aurora. Not in name, but in spirit. Malachi's never completed a bond before. He had the potential, but no one triggered it." The mention of him possibly binding with others made my stomach twist with an unwelcome spike of jealousy. I lowered my gaze, toying with the edge of my shirt. "So I guess I triggered it," I muttered. Celia's expression softened. "And you saved his life in the process. That's what mates do, in our world, share power. Don't run from it. Embrace it, or it'll gnaw at you until you can't breathe." I didn't reply, not trusting myself. because some reckless part of me wanted to run to Malachi right now, yank him into a closet, and demand we figure out exactly what that bond meant. But pride still clung to my insides. I had never let anyone define me. The idea of belonging to him, no matter how unbelievably attracted I was, made me uneasy. Late afternoon, we parted ways. Some pack members went on patrol, some stayed behind. Malachi insisted on escorting me home again, refusing to let me out of his sight. As we drove, I studied his profile. The tense line of his jaw, the glimpses of vulnerability flickering in his eyes. "You okay?" I asked softly. He huffed, not looking at me. "I'm used to fighting alone. Now, everything's changed." "Because of me," I said, not a question. He finally glanced over, gaze pinned. "Yes," he said, a haunted note creeping in. "If it was just me, I wouldn't fear losing. But you're a factor I can't ignore." A coil of warmth and anxiety knotted my stomach. I reached out, covering his hand on the gear shift. "You won't lose me," I said, voice trembling with conviction I wasn't sure I possessed. "I'm tougher than I look." His hand flipped, fingers tangling with mine, squeezing just once before letting go to shift gears. We drove in loaded silence, a current of unspoken desire humming beneath. We arrived at my cabin. The evening sky streaked red, wind picking up a warning scent of storm. Malachi parked, scanned the perimeter. "All clear," he murmured, as if verifying for my benefit. "But I'll stay again tonight." I started to protest, then realized I wanted him here. Pride be damned. "Fine," I said, pretending it was an inconvenience. We ate a quick meal from the meager groceries I had, then sat on the couch. The tension between us was thick. Neither of us wanted to talk about the day's planning or the potential threats. We were ignoring the elephant in the room, the bond that linked us, soul deep. Finally, I exhaled, leaning forward, elbows on knees. "Malachi," I said, my voice echoing in the hushed cabin. "This bond, is it permanent? Or can it break?" He gave me a tormented look. "Some say it can be rejected. But it tears both hearts to shreds. Usually kills one or both. Others say once formed, it's fated. It's how we're built, Aurora. We share strength. That's why you can fight like one of us." My breath caught. So all those times I felt different, it was because we locked onto each other's essence? He nodded, eyes flickering with an unguarded tenderness. "I never thought I'd find that. Didn't think I deserved it." My heart twisted. "Why not?" A shadow flicked in his gaze, something about his past, perhaps. He scrubbed a hand down his face. "I've done awful things to protect this town. To protect my pack. Killed. Threatened. Driven out other work creatures. Sometimes I wonder if the line between me and a monster like Darius is thinner than I want to admit." Emotion clogged my throat. "You're not a monster. You're you." He snorted softly, but his lips curled into a faint smirk. That's comforting, in a weird way. Silence, heavy as lead, fell. I couldn't stand the distance on the couch. Slowly, I slid closer, until my thigh brushed his. He didn't move away, just watched me with a quiet intensity. I reached up, letting my fingers brush the stubble along his jaw. "You saved me." I saved you. We're stuck now. His eyes dipped to my mouth, then back up. We don't have to be stuck. Heart pounding, I inched nearer. He bent forward, capturing my lips in a slow, searching kiss. Every nerve in my body ignited. My arms slipped around his neck, pulling him closer. I felt him sigh into the kiss, tension unraveling. God, it felt right. Like the completion of something we'd begun the night he revealed his wolf form. I lost track of time, leaning back against the cushions with him half on top of me. Our kisses escalated, fervent, threading my fingers through his dark hair, while he explored the curve of my waist, my hips. Heat coiled low in my belly. We parted only when breath became a desperate need. I stared up, chest heaving, seeing my own desire mirrored in his stormy eyes. He murmured my name, voice hoarse, as if it were a prayer. Aurora. I swallowed. I'm here, I whispered. It was all I could manage. Because part of me wanted to drag him to bed. But a flicker of caution tugged at my mind. Was I ready for that step, or was it the bond's intensity pushing me? He read the hesitation in my eyes. Gently, he pressed his forehead to mine, breathing ragged. We have time, he said, as though the concept of waiting pained him. I'm not going anywhere. I trembled with gratitude. Thank you. We shifted to an embrace that was calmer, though the embers of passion still glowed. Eventually, we dozed in each other's arms, the cabin's meager heat enough because we had each other. When I woke at dawn, pinned under his solid warmth, a fragile sense of belonging wrapped around me. For the first time in my chaotic life, I felt wanted, anchored. I closed my eyes again, letting the moment linger. The next couple of days passed in an odd blur of near domestic routine, overshadowed by the threat of more rogues. We spent our evenings in whispered conversations, sometimes sharing a bed, though not consummating anything beyond heated kisses and closeness. I was still grappling with the magnitude of our bond, and he sensed that. He never pushed. If anything, he seemed grateful for every small sign I accepted him. During daylight, I helped the pack gather supplies, improved warding around the outskirts of Ravenwood, and tried not to flinch at the sideways glances from the townsfolk who noticed me trailing behind Malachi Stone like some ally or lover. The sheriff's questions loomed. Why was an outsider so involved? We brushed him off with partial truths. Meanwhile, Celia taught me rudimentary knowledge about how to sense supernatural energy, how to strengthen the intangible link I had with Malachi to guard against mental intrusion. She said if any other rogue tried to break me psychologically, I'd have a shield. That tidbit chilled me, but I absorbed it. At dusk one evening, a tremor of tension swept through the pack. Jonas arrived at the lodge breathless, reporting sightings of multiple werbeasts near the old logging roads. A potential incursion. We mobilized quickly, driving out in a convoy of trucks, rifles loaded with silver ammunition. I clung to the passenger seat next to Malachi, my heart in my throat. This was no simple recon. If these intruders were anything like Darius, we might be in for a slaughter. Rain pelted the windshield. The sky had turned bruise purple, the air electric with an oncoming storm. We arrived at the logging road, stepping into ankle-deep mud. The pack fanned out in wolf form or human with weapons. Malachi insisted I stick close. My adrenaline soared. The forest smelled of wet leaves and tension so thick it practically crackled. We found signs of a skirmish, clawed marks on trees, footprints half washed away by the rain. Then the intruders appeared, a group of men and women with eyes reflecting silver in the gloom, shapes half wolf, half human, all savage. One called out a challenge. I recognized none of them, but Malachi stiffened. He hissed that they were from an old rival pack, possibly allied with Darius or seeking to fill his vacuum. My gut clenched. Violence erupted. Wolves lunged from both sides. I found myself pressed against a fallen trunk, rifle shaking in my hands, trying to keep track of Malachi in the chaos. Lightning flashed overhead, illuminating snapping jaws and muscles straining under fur. Blood sprayed as one of Malachi's packmates took a blow to the shoulder. I fired once, missing my target as they darted away within human speed. Another shape barreled into me, knocking me to the mud. My rifle flew from my grip. Pain sang in my ribs. I scrambled up, heart roaring. The attacker, a woman with elongated canines and shining eyes, grinned, lips parted. "You must be Malachi's precious human," she sneered. "Let's see if your bond can save you." She lashed out with claws that scoured my arm. I cried out, stumbling. Then a black blur, Malachi's wolf form collided with her, a savage growl ripping from his throat. They tumbled, biting and clawing. My vision blurred with panic. Another intruder aimed for me, but Jonas tackled him, and they rolled into the underbrush. Lightning flashed again, revealing Malachi pinned beneath that female were-beast. She slashed at his chest, but he twisted, jaws clamping down on her forearm. She screeched, twisting free, and leapt back. Blood seeped from Malachi's muzzle. He advanced, unstoppable. She fled, vanishing into the gloom with the rest of her retreating allies. The ambush had failed, but they'd inflicted damage. My lungs heaved. I crawled to Malachi, reaching for him. The black wolf turned, panting, eyes meeting mine, wild and fierce, but relief flooded them. Then he collapsed onto his side. "No," I choked, pulling him up. We were still in the thick mud, the rest of the pack chasing down or regrouping. My hands pressed to his bleeding flank, panic swallowing me. "Not again." He let out a strangled growl, pain lacing it. Slowly, he shifted back to human, trembling under my palms. "I'm fine," he gasped through gritted teeth, though the deep lacerations said otherwise. Blood coated my fingers. My own arm stung from the earlier claw wound. "Let me see," I commanded. He tried to stand, but his leg buckled. "Damn it, Malachi. Don't be stubborn." Jonas rushed over, breath ragged. "We need to get him back to the lodge. Celia can help." He eyed me grimly. He took a silver-laced claw, I think. Silver-laced. The words made my stomach flip. We half-dragged Malachi to the truck. He groaned, half-conscious. I climbed in after him, ignoring my own pain, letting Jonas drive. Rain hammered the roof. My heart hammered even harder. Malachi's eyelids fluttered, breath coming in rasping gasps. The bond thrummed with his agony, a deep echo that threatened to crack me open. I pressed a hand to his cheek, ignoring how the rain-soaked seats chilled me to the bone. "Stay with me," I whispered. He tried to focus, lips quirking in a humorless smile. "I told you, you're stuck with me," he managed, voice raw. "I'm not giving up that easily." The lodge was in pandemonium. Wounded wolves littered the main room. Celia barked orders for bandages, silver antidotes. We laid Malachi on a sturdy table, stepping aside as Celia quickly examined him. She told Jonas to fetch the special herbal cure. I hovered, half in shock, pressing my uninjured hand to Malachi's. He gave me a shaky squeeze in return. His injuries are serious, Celia muttered. Silver poison can kill even the strongest. She shot me a penetrating look. You share a bond. You might be able to help flush the poison if you give him your energy. But it's dangerous for you. I barely blinked. What do I do? She guided me through a ritual, placing my hands over his wounds, focusing on the invisible tether that bound us. I closed my eyes, letting that bond flare. The sensation was like stepping into a vortex of swirling power. Heat poured from me into him, driving out the toxic burn. My vision blurred with swirling lights. Through it all, I clutched his hand, refusing to let go. Then pain lanced my side, as if the silver sought a new host. I cried out, tears streaking my cheeks. Celia pressed me to keep going. At last, Malachi inhaled a deep, clear breath. The black lines creeping across his veins receded. The tension around his eyes eased. Celia yanked my hands away, and I collapsed to the floor, darkness crowding the edges of my vision. I heard muffled voices, Jonas shouting my name. Malachi's ragged voice, full of alarm. Then everything went black. I came to in a quiet side room, a warm blanket over me, the smell of medicinal herbs in the air. My arm burned from where I was scratched, but otherwise I felt surprisingly intact. The door opened, and Malachi slipped in, wearing loose pants, bandages around his torso. He crossed to me in 2 strides, eyes shining with relief. Aurora, he breathed. You're awake. I tried to sit up, grimacing at the stiffness in my ribs. He helped me gently, his hand trembling on my shoulder. Did it work? I asked. He nodded, eyes tearing. You saved me. Again. He sank onto the edge of the bed, resting his forehead against my shoulder. You nearly killed yourself doing it. I exhaled unsteadily, heart clenching. I guess we're even now. My attempt at humor fell flat. He lifted his head, eyes glimmering with too many emotions, gratitude, worry, longing, love. I can't lose you, he said, voice cracking. I never thought I'd say that to anyone, but this bond, it's everything. Tears welled up. I reached for his hand, clasping it. I'm not going anywhere. But we can't keep dancing around it. We have to face the fact that I'm yours, I guess. Whether I like it or not. A watery laugh escaped me. And I think, maybe, I do like it. That half-smile returned to his face, though tears rimmed his eyes. Aurora, he whispered, leaning in to rest his forehead against mine. I love you. The simple confession stole my breath. I clutched him, heart in free fall. I love you too, I whispered, no sense denying it anymore. The words unlocked something inside me, a surge of emotion that left me dizzy. His lips captured mine, a gentle, reverent kiss that mended the cracks in my soul. We parted, both breathing unevenly. I asked about the pack. He said we drove off the intruders but needed to remain vigilant. There might be more out there. But at least we're stronger together. He squeezed my hand. And you're part of us now. Over the next days, we recovered. My scratch from that war-beast healed faster than it should have, likely due to our bond. Malachi's side was stiff, but the poison was gone. We spent time patrolling with Jonas, Nessa, the others, ensuring no more hostiles lurked. The sheriff eventually realized we were doing his job better than he could. He even made a begrudging peace with Malachi's pack. The town began breathing easier. I wrote private notes for my article, but I decided I'd never publicly expose Ravenwood's secrets. The risk was too high. This was my life now, not just a story. One twilight, as we walked the quiet main street, Malachi suddenly asked me to follow him. He led me behind an old feed store, where an overgrown trail angled into the forest. I teased him about clandestine meetings, but his expression was serious. We emerged in a small meadow ringed by sweet-smelling grass, the sun setting in a blaze of color. The hush was sacred. He faced me, holding my hands between us. "I know this might be impulsive," he said, voice warm with affection, "but I've never been so sure of anything in my life. Will you be my mate, officially, before the pack? We can hold a ceremony. Or do it alone, just for us. But I want everyone to know you're mine, and I'm yours." Tears burned my eyes. I thought we already sealed that bond. He smiled, that slow, devastating grin. "We did. But I want to declare it. I want to stand beside you in front of Celia, Jonas, the pack, and vow that you are Aurora Stone, if you'll have my name." Emotion choked me. That's a lot. I'd never pictured myself as some supernatural bride. But the sincerity in his eyes, the raw longing, I couldn't deny how fiercely I loved him. So I nodded, tears sliding down my cheeks. "Yes," I whispered, voice trembling. "Yes." He laughed, a rare joyous sound. Then he swept me into his arms, kissing me until I forgot how to breathe. The meadow glowed with a last burst of sunset, as if blessing us. The next week was a whirlwind. The pack teased Malachi mercilessly, while Celia fussed over me like a protective mother. She insisted on blessing us both with old rites. Jonas teased that we should hold a full moon ceremony in the lodge. I insisted on something small, just the pack, no pomp. Malachi agreed. He told me we'd do it however I wanted. My heart soared, warmth flooding me at the idea that I'd never truly be alone again. The night of the ceremony arrived. The full moon hung high, luminous. Malachi wore simple black, looking devastating and calm, though I sensed tension in his stance. I wore a plain white dress that Celia had found in some trunk. My hair loose. The entire pack formed a circle around the clearing we'd first visited, the ring of ancient standing stones. Firelight danced in the center. I stood across from Malachi, heart hammering, while Celia chanted old words that stirred the wind. He took my hands, gazing at me with unwavering devotion. I recalled the first time I saw him in the diner, how his warning felt like a threat. Now, here we stood, forging a vow. When the chanting ended, he slipped a braided leather cord around my wrist, symbolic of the pack's unity. I repeated a vow Celia prompted, promising to stand by him, share his burdens, protect Ravenwood. My voice shook with tears. He swore the same, calling me his forever mate. We sealed it with a kiss, which the pack whooped at, howling into the moonlit sky in a chorus of raw celebration. I clung to him, laughter and tears mingling. He whispered in my ear that he loved me, that we were unstoppable together. The bond roared to life, a sweet warmth rushing between us like a final puzzle piece clicking into place. The pack howled again, a joyous noise that made the hair on my neck stand up. We spent the rest of the night in quiet celebration, sharing wine, mead, bits of food the pack prepared. Jonas gave a toast to the crazy human who tamed our alpha. Nessa teased that she'd never seen Malachi so off his guard. Malachi just rolled his eyes, pulling me close against his side. I felt safe, cherished, brimming with love I never thought I'd find. It was surreal, but it was real. Eventually, the pack drifted away, letting us slip into the forest for privacy. Fireflies danced among the ferns, and the moonlight painted our path. Malachi laced his fingers through mine. We stopped in a small glade, the hush thick with anticipation. My pulse hammered as I gazed up at him. "We're really doing this," I said, half laughing at the impossibility. "It's insane." He stroked my cheek. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Then he pulled me into a kiss that sent fire rolling through my veins. No more hesitation. We sank onto a bed of soft moss, the night around us singing with wind and distant pack howls. We let the bond take over, no fear, no regrets. It was a claiming as old as time, and it burned away every doubt left in my heart. We lay entwined, breath mingling, long after the last star winked out. In that moment, I understood that home wasn't a place, or even a story, it was a person. Malachi. Everything I'd run from in my life had led me here. Morning light found us back at the cabin, dozing together in my bed, bodies content, souls bound. My phone buzzed with half a dozen messages from the sheriff about suspicious sightings at the north boundary. It never really ended, did it? But I didn't mind. Because now, I had a reason to fight, a reason to protect Ravenwood as fiercely as Malachi did. This was my pack, too. We rose, shared a quick meal, teased each other about how domestic we were becoming. Then we ventured outside to greet the day, stepping onto the porch. The sun was warm on our faces. He wrapped an arm around my waist, kissed my temple. I scanned the tranquil trees. My gaze caught movement far off, a lone black wolf slipping between pines, not Malachi but one of the pack, patrolling. My lips quivered with a smile. Malachi murmured, "We'll see what the sheriff wants, then maybe run with the others. Our territory is bigger than you know, and the pack wants to celebrate properly." I nodded, leaning into him. "Let's do it." He gave me that heart-stopping grin. "You sure about this life?" I turned, looping my arms around his neck. "I've never been more sure. And if another threat comes, we'll face it together." His kiss was my answer. The forest rustled, carrying the promise of new challenges. But I felt no fear. Because we had each other, a bond forged in darkness yet blazing bright. I smiled against his lips, letting the warmth of the morning and the steady beat of his heart anchor me to this wild, wonderful reality. In Ravenwood, the shadows might never fully disappear. Monsters might prowl the edges of the night, old grudges might resurface, and storms might gather. But I'd met the man who turned into a black wolf, who saved me from a nightmare, who swore to stand by me as we forged a new path. That was enough. More than enough. And so we stepped off the porch, hand in hand, into a future I never saw coming but wouldn't trade for the world.